You mentioned earlier that you published your first book while in high school. First of all, that's a lot of us when we're in high school we weren't thinking about publishing books. A lot of us were thinking about doing a whole lot of other not so good stuff with our times, and we spent it doing a lot of things we shouldn't have been doing. But what was the book about, and then what was your experience of just writing it and doing that and putting it out, and what was just that experience of you doing that?
Yeah, so the book was called A Career in Contests. It's I entered a lot of contests as a in middle school and high school, and I learned a lot of strategies to winning them. So like magazine contests, they have like little sweepstakes, like send this postcard in and you
Yeah.
win tickets to the Jonas Brothers concert. Like I
Hmm.
did those and I won a bunch of them because like there were
Wow.
different strategies, like design your postcard with stickers. Like it worked. So I wrote a book about how to win those. The book is terribly outdated now because there aren't magazines like that with sweepstakes. But at the
Yeah.
time it was pretty neat. And I had also broken a world record for making the world's longest chain of bracelets at the time. So that was my way of promoting the book. And it was to me like, oh, that's the ultimate contest that will show people, hey, we should really read this book because she, broke a world record.
Yeah.
That was my idea. But in actuality, it didn't turn out like that. Like I self-published. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything about marketing. So I published on CreateSpace, which is now KDP. It's Amazon's publishing platform.
Hmm.
And like maybe a dozen friends and family read it. Like that was it. And I'm like, oh man. So it was a great lesson. And that's why now I work so hard in marketing people's books because I learned
Yeah.
what happens when you don't market it and you're just a high school kid who assumes everybody's going to read it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, so that was actually something I was going to ask later on the on the Guinness World Record. What was that experience like? Like I've heard people talk about like breaking a world record. Do they like come out to visit you, and do they come out and take all the pictures and do all the whole nine to like ensure? And is there like some guy with glasses on there like counting everything, like making sure, hey, is this accurate? Is this the right bands for this thing? So how was that whole experience?
Yeah, it's a lot more paperwork than you would think. Like literally 200 pages worth of paperwork. Now, as far as the actual people coming out, you have to pay for them to come out. And I was a high school
Wow.
kid who couldn't afford, it was a few $1,000s. I'm like, yeah, I can't. And they're located in the UK, so you have to cover that. I'm like, yeah, no, not doing that. So what I had to do instead was get my own certified people. So I had my high school principal and the editor of our local newspaper come to the house and physically count the stuff and be my eyewitnesses. Then I had to have a notary sign off on their stuff. I had to literally film myself for 72 hours making the bracelets because it took me 72 hours to
Wow.
put them all together. So I had to film myself, send that footage in so that they could see I personally made everything. And yeah, then I had to wait literally a year for all that stuff to be verified by them.
Wow. That's a whole process. And
It
speaking
is.
of that, going through that whole process, I think that shows like your resilience and your persistency. And then I just want to ask how that has played a role into just you starting your company and starting your different businesses, and how that has just affected you going into the future. You mentioned earlier you don't like idle time. You don't like just sitting around. How has that played a role just in you continually building yourself out and building up just everything around you?
Yeah, I definitely, when you said resilience, yeah, you face a lot of rejection in this industry. You send out proposals to clients every day, and not all of them say yes, even though you want them to. Not all of them say yes, so you do have to get a pretty thick skin.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so and you have to learn how to follow up. So with Guinness, luckily my mom taught me how to follow up. She kept following up with them and calling them and emailing them and showing me, okay, this is how you follow up with somebody when you want something. And that stuck with me. So now if I send a proposal to a client and I haven't heard from them, I'm going to call them. I'm going to email them and be like, hey, do you have any questions? So resilience comes in handy in business and in everything that you're doing. Even if you're looking for a job or something, like, when I started out, I was just a freelancer. There was my first big client I got only because I would Skype them every day because they had a need for somebody to edit their video scripts. And every
Yeah.
day I would just go on Skype and be like, hey, Doug, just checking in. And he literally told me that it took about a month. About a month later, he says, the only reason that we're hiring you is because of how persistent you were. And it turned into a huge my first really big contract. So yeah, resilience pays for itself.
Yeah, that's amazing. That speaks volumes about you. And I guess that's one of the things. I know you train other speakers. I know you speak publicly, and I know you train other people just about part of their marketing strategy and part of the ways that they go about ensuring that they're able to get that business. But I'm guessing that's like one of the core strategies that you try to show and tell people to just to stay on top of things and not just allow it to just kind of you know, it may happen, it may not happen, and just kind of let it be.
100%. I have a team as well, and so many of them come in, and you say, you can tell them follow up, they don't know what that means, so I have to literally train them and make CRMs for them to like go through and say, okay, it's Thursday, I need to follow up with this one, this one, this one.
Yeah.
So important.
So how do you go about that? Do you have like a to-do list that you keep on a regular basis? Do you have like a Gantt chart that's like, at this point in time, I should have followed up with this guy, and this guy, this must have been checked in process? How do you go about making up those processes and setting those things in place?
Yeah, so we use Asana. We used to use Trello, and I personally used Todoist, but as a team, we use Asana, and we have it set up like a CRM. So, we'll have, these are cold leads. These are leads that we need to follow up with. And then we have a due date. And on that due date, you just go your to-do list and see, oh, okay, it's Thursday, I need to follow up with John. And then we have our follow-up number 2 list. And then there's our, okay, this client is ghosting us. Let's reach out to them in a month, or, something like that.
That's pretty cool. That's one thing that I'm learning how to do, is just to like write stuff down a lot of times, because it's like you say stuff in your mind, but then at the end of the day, it's just kind of like my dad says, it's better to have a dull pencil than a sharp mind, because you're gonna forget something. It's just better to just write everything down to keep track of what you have going on.
I have not heard that one. That's a great one. And I just read something yesterday. What was that book? It's a great book. I can't think of the name of it. I'll remember. But he said in there that humans are basically offloading their minds to the computer. So if I didn't have my to-doist where I could just like type up, it's so true. It's like a backup for your brain.
Yeah, definitely. So, I hope you enjoyed that little snippet of the Rambling Mind podcast. If you want more of the Rambling Mind podcast, or if you want to listen to the whole episode that you just heard, go check it out on any podcast listening platform, whether that be Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Breaker, Stitcher. I could go on, but you guys already know which podcast you love to use to listen to. So go check it out. Link down in the description as well. I'm going to catch y'all later. Peace.